will be invoking the Defense Production Act just in case we need it. I view it as in a sense, a wartime president. I mean, that's what we're fighting. We had the best economy we've ever had. And then one day you have to close it down in order to defeat this enemy.
All right, President Trump says he's a wartime president in the fight against coronavirus, evoking the Defense Production Act.
So what is this war-era measure, and how can it help us fight the coronavirus? Joining us now to discuss is Vice President of Foreign Policy for the Heritage Foundation, James Carafano. James, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. So what is this? How can it help?
Yeah. Hey, can I just say one thing first? I've been following your guys' coverage, and Fox has been great. I just think you've been really informative and spot on and really helpful. So thank you for that.
Appreciate that, James.
So let me just say, so this is not the big deal people might think it is. This law has been around for decades. It's actually been used like 50 times. Obama used this law. We used it during the Gulf War to make sure that we had body armor. It doesn't nationalize anything. What it basically does is if the federal government really needs something for a national security purpose, it basically tells the industry we have to be the customer of choice, and it cuts a lot of red tape so you could rapidly get into purchasing and production and distribution. That's all it does. And so to have that in place in case we do have a medical surge need, and we need a lot of additional medical equipment,
which we already do.
It's a very prudent thing to have in place, right?
Yeah, I mean they're talking about we need ventilators, we need a lot of things,
right.
Medical supplies to keep our medical professionals safe. I want to ask you, you look at Italy right now, some other countries, they've got a complete lockdown. If this requires companies to work for the federal government, I guess that would require people that work for those companies to ignore the quarantine, and they have to go into work, right?
So fortunately, when you're dealing with a virus, there's a lot of precautions that you can make that allow people to work safely in a lot of environments. So I think that's something that's very, very doable. Getting people to work, making sure that they're safe in the workplace. I think that's very possible.
James, do you know are there any other acts or is there anything else that the president can tap into that would help in this right now?
Well, the president has about 130 plus emergency authorities that he can tap into. I've actually been really impressed. I've worked on particularly the disaster crisis area for decades. They've really done an inventory of all the authorities, the legal authorities that the president has, and they've really kind of been creative in tapping into those, and primarily for the right purpose, which is to really push assets and resources to state and local governments, which are really the front lines in flattening the curve. Stopping the spread of the virus, protecting the vulnerable populations. This is work where the lead has to be at the local level, and what the federal government is doing is backstopping them with resources and capabilities. So far, I'd say they've done a pretty good job.
Okay. Let's talk about these two Navy hospital ships that I guess they're going to put one on each coast to expand the availability of these hospital beds. That everybody's worried about not having enough space for all the patients we could see. What do you make of this?
So these hospital ships are a nice surge capacity. They have a limited capacity, but they are very, very, very capable. You also have to remember, though, they're largely stocked by medical personnel that if you're putting them on the ship, you're taking them away from someplace else. So I would say they're more of a bridge thing. If you need an emergency, let's get a couple of beds in here, they're great. But if you're going to actually be overwhelmed, then you're going to have to build ad hoc medical facilities to do that, and these ships won't do that. And of course, they are a very expensive and very limited asset. But again, out of an overabundance of caution, putting all the resources on the table that we have, that I think is prudent.
James, a couple minutes ago, you mentioned the importance of flattening the curve, and I know that this is something that a lot of people have either heard about or you've seen charts like this. I mean, some people still don't take this seriously. Can you talk about the importance of this and how this is really the way that this is going to get done?
Well, I think if you look at the countries that have already suffered kind of the first wave of the virus, China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, South Korea, how did they come out of this? And the answer is they flattened the curve. In other words, they limited the spread of the virus. That's the single most important thing. And I would argue it was largely done by social distancing. And now if you look at what they're doing is they're trying to prevent reinfections by people coming back into the country, so the travel restrictions are really important. It's the fastest way to get out of the back of this. I know people are very uncertain about the future and where things hold, but we have a good lesson that you can get ahead of this if you stop the spread of the infection. And if you want to get back to normal economic activity, go to Disney World, do everything else. The number one thing all Americans can do is help break the back of the spread of the disease right now.
That's good advice. James, thank you so much. We do appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.